It all kicks off with a girl looking on in terror as fire engulfs everything around her. Meanwhile, our hero is also watching it all unfold, unable to believe what's happening. Suddenly, a massive man with a sword appears, ready to strike the defenseless young woman. Seeing this, our protagonist screams in desperation, trying to prevent the impending tragedy. But it was too late, and the young man could only watch as the fatal blow was struck. Amidst the flames, the villain turns to the hero with a look of contempt and superiority. Then, our hero breaks down in tears, screaming in anguish and rage for the loss he suffered. Without mercy, the bearded man stomps on the kid's head, who is already on the ground, completely defeated. With his face in the dust, he hears the enemy say that everything that happened, every single detail of that horrible night was solely his fault due to his incompetence. The reason for it all was simple: our protagonist was too weak to protect anyone. Then, the young man wakes up in a cold sweat, gasping for air as if he were reliving it all over again. A female voice then calls his name, Do-jin, making him open his eyes in alarm. The woman asks if he's okay, as he was sweating and breathless in bed. Finally, she asks if our hero had another nightmare about that terrible day. He replies that he's been having the same dream over and over, and thinks it must be from exhaustion. The woman stays silent for a moment, looking quite concerned about his situation. Then she calls him by his name and asks if he's really going to quit his current job. The woman explains that she doesn't want to see him getting hurt anymore because of this dangerous line of work, and she also doesn't want him to hurt anyone else by continuing this life of violence. At that exact moment, the hero's cell phone on the nightstand starts to vibrate. The protagonist answers the call and asks his boss if it's about Ho Hying's crew. He then gets out of bed and says he's on his way to the meeting spot. His partner sits up and asks in surprise if he's really going out at this time of night. With his back to her, the hero replies that a work emergency came up that he needs to handle. But he promises that as soon as he finishes this one task, he'll put in his notice once and for all. As he stands up, a massive tiger tattoo is revealed on his muscular back. The hero states with conviction that he won't live like a monster anymore after this night. The scene then shifts to an isolated warehouse by the water, which seems to be the meeting point. There, a man lights a cigarette and says that all-out war isn't worth it because it brings the cops. He adds that in the worst-case scenario, his face could end up on social media, and we are introduced to Gu Tae-sung, the leader of the Tae-sung crew. In front of all the members of both gangs, he proposes to settle everything with a single fight to avoid more trouble. On the other side, we have Choi Ho Hyung, who agrees and says the loser gives up control of the docks as the prize. He then asks mockingly if his rival is really going to put all his faith in the so-called ogre. Ho Hyung boasts that they brought a very strong rookie for tonight's fight. With a smile, Sung says he looks like some gym rat and asks Do-jin if he thinks he can handle the opponent. Our hero then appears and coldly replies that it doesn't matter one bit. He faces the crowd and confidently states that he doesn't care who the opponent is. Some members of the other gang recognize him as the ogre and say they heard he sent 10 guys to the hospital by himself. The opposing fighter hears the nickname and smirks. He then clenches his fist tightly and calls the protagonist pathetic without hesitation. The guy lunges forward and lands a punch on the hero, thinking they're just street trash brawling in alleys. He continues to brag in his head, saying that even though he got kicked out, he was a pro. The fighter reveals that if it weren't for a debt, he would never have set foot in a place like this. After a series of blows, he says that, as expected, the ogre was nothing special. The professional fighter continues his strategy and lands a punch to the hero's ribs. With his hands trapped, our protagonist seems to be cornered with no chance to fight back. The opponent then seizes the opportunity and lands a vicious knee to the young man's face. But even bleeding, the hero bites his lip, enduring the pain with an angry expression. The pro then gets him from behind and applies a chokehold, saying the fight is over. Laughing, he mocks the protagonist's nickname and invites him to train at his gym. Our hero thanks him for the invitation but says he hates the floors in gyms. He then squeezes the opponent's arm with force and complains about the sweaty smell of the mats. And with insane strength, he flips him over his shoulder, saying the mats are too soft. The pro is shocked by the sudden turnaround and screams in pain from the impact with the ground. Now on top, his opponent pins him down, and the guy thinks he needs to defend himself. But the protagonist starts delivering a series of brutal punches right where it hurts the most. The professional fighter can't take the pressure and starts crying, begging him to stop. Ignoring the pleas, the hero grabs the opponent's hair with a cold expression on his face. And finally, he slams the guy's head into the ground with full force ending the fight for good. Seeing the scene, Boss Tae-sung lets out a laugh and says it looks like the fight is already over. The other boss, however, is shocked and yells that their professional fighter was totally destroyed. One of his men asks for more time, but the leader says it's too late and they're not there to play games. Because in a real fight, there are no rules, and when it gets to this point, it's over for the loser. Just then, someone in the crowd calls him a little girl for pulling his opponent's hair, but the pro realizes he can't do anything because the hero won't let him escape. He remembers that when he tried for a takedown, he was simply crushed by the protagonist's weight and strength. Now on the ground, he's completely dominated without the slightest chance to counter the blows. Then the hero lands a knee to his face, and without stopping, he continues with powerful kicks on the guy who is already defenseless. With his face all battered, the professional finally passes out on the ground, unable to move. Protagonist prepares to deliver the final blow and end the fight once and for all. The opponent is already nearly unconscious and completely covered in wounds on the ground. But suddenly our hero stops for a second and seems to hesitate before the last strike. He then remembers his girlfriend's words, asking him not to hurt anyone and to change. This makes him pause, but he wins up for a powerful strike anyway, and without mercy, he lands the blow on the extra's head, driving it into the ground. Our hero then stands up and declares that the fight is finally over. His boss congratulates him on a job well done and announces that the docks now belong to the Tae-sung crew. With the conflict resolved, the hero decides he's going to live a normal life without hurting anyone. Suddenly, something strange happens, and he feels the presence of an odd voice. This unexpected sensation leaves him completely confused, with no idea what's going on. But the losing boss stomps on the fighter's head and says the fight isn't over because he's still breathing. He glares at the hero and says that in the gangster life, a fight only ends when someone stops breathing for good. With a cold look, the leader accuses him of trying to take the easy way out. Then the man gives an ultimatum, warning that if the hero doesn't finish his rival, they don't get the docks. The losing boss then taunts him, calling him ogre and asking if he got the message. Our protagonist remains silent, not saying a word. Seeing the lack of reaction, the leader gets irritated and demands that the hero answer when spoken to. Just then, the hero's gaze changes completely, and it looks like someone else has taken control. Furious with the silence, the losing boss pulls out a knife and threatens the hero for ignoring him. However, before the rival boss's blade could reach the hero, another one meets it. Tae-sung stops him and says the hero isn't responding because the other boss is just talking nonsense. Then the leader of Tae-sung also pulls out a knife and suggests they settle this like gentlemen. Choi laughs at the idea of gentlemen and complains that he won't stay quiet, while some rookie provokes him. His rival reminds him that Choi was the one who started talking and then asks Dojin if he agrees. With a dark expression, the protagonist finally says something, drawing everyone's attention. He then asks if anyone else is seeing that, leaving both bosses confused. Boss Tae-sung is completely lost and asks what on earth his fighter is talking about. Our hero's eye glows an eerie blue as he points to something only he can see. A blue flame completely captures the hero's attention, leaving him paralyzed. He stares at the mysterious blue flame floating in the air right in front of him, completely baffled. His boss looks in the same direction but sees nothing and asks confusedly, "What's blue?" The hero remembers that it appeared out of nowhere right in front of him, freezing him in place. The flame left him motionless, as if he were trapped in a nightmare, unable to move. With wide eyes, the hero hears the voice again say, "Reincarnation of Jin Gang." A mysterious voice then speaks in his mind, saying it's time to honor their contract. Suddenly, the blue flame enters through the hero's mouth, leaving everyone there completely shocked. He doubles over in pain, and his boss worriedly asks what's happening to him. The protagonist says with difficulty that the mysterious flame is entering him right now. His face shows pure terror as he feels the strange energy course through his body. Just then, an old memory returns, and we see several men lying on the ground, totally defeated. Amidst the bodies, he kneels beside the girl he failed to protect in the past. He holds her face and blames himself for everything, saying he was too weak to save her. Crying, the hero apologizes to the young woman for not being able to protect her from the massacre. A voice then asks him if he truly desires his long-awaited revenge. The entity then says it will lend him its strength so he can get what he wants. For this, the blue spirit proposes a pact and asks the young man to offer a sacrifice in return. He understands that the flame, which seemed like a hallucination, was what the being wanted all along. With no other choice, the hero clenches his fists and accepts the deal to gain his power. He says he will provide a sacrifice, as there are many people he wants wiped off the map. With tears of blood streaming down his face, he begs for the power to finally have his revenge. The blue entity then warns that from that moment on, even if his body rots, as long as his soul continues to exist, the agreement between them will never be broken for any reason. Suddenly, his nails begin to grow, and a blue aura completely envelopes his hand. The spirit then declares that the pact is forever and that he is now its eternal servant. With that, our hero screams in pain as his body is completely consumed by the blue flames. The mysterious voice finishes by saying that he is no longer human and has now become a monster. He screams as the blue flames consume him entirely. At that, the entity solemnly declares that the contract between them has finally been sealed. Then, the mysterious voice explains that from now on, everything that perishes at his hands, be it a nobody or even a god, will all become an offering to the mysterious blue entity that granted him power. With that, his eyes blood like a mangacap, and in exchange for these sacrifices, the spirit promises to give the hero the feared tyrannical demon star, a force that is feared by all beings on Earth, the absolute power of the entity. But the entity warns him that he needs to remember one very important thing about the pact. The voice warns that the moment its power overwhelms the hero, who is now its vessel, our protagonist will also become an offering to the blue entity, with no escape. Back in reality, our hero wonders what in the world just happened to him. He is completely disoriented and questions what that strange vision he had was. The hero looks at his hands and can't believe what he just witnessed. He's sure he felt his entire body burning in intense blue flames. The rival brings the blade closer to the hero, getting his attention. The villain mocks him for screaming to himself like a maniac and says he's completely lost his mind. However, the hero grabs the villain's hand. With a defiant look, our hero grabs the knife and asks if the rival wants to test if he's really gone crazy. The other gang's boss gives a sarcastic smile and thinks that this fearless guy has completely lost it. The protagonist then proposes to settle everything at once with a fight between the Tzeong and Hosen factions. But suddenly, the sound of police sirens echoes through the warehouse, surprising everyone. Boss Tai Sung grabs his rival's hand and says that the bell ending the round has already rung. With a smile, he suggests they stop for today and promises to set up another meeting soon. Boss Choi is furious about the interruption, but eventually gives in and lowers his knife. He agrees to meet again but warns that next time, the rights to the pier and their lives will be on the line. With that said, the rival gang turns and leaves the warehouse, leaving the Tae Sung crew behind. The boss apologizes to the hero, but he says it doesn't matter since they would have found any excuse to fight. More importantly, the leader asks what happened earlier, as the hero looked like he'd seen a ghost. The protagonist says it was nothing while looking at his hand. He makes up an excuse that he's been a bit tired lately and has been having strange dreams. The scene then shifts to a luxury car driving through the dark city streets. Inside the vehicle, the rival boss looks at his arm, still feeling his pulse after the hero grabbed it. Meanwhile, in the car, he wonders what kind of power our hero has. Suddenly, his cell phone rings, showing a restricted number and making him quite tense. He answers the call and stammers when he realizes it's a certain Mr. Kui on the line. The gang leader tries to calm him down and assures him there's no need to worry about the pier rights. But the mysterious voice questions him, saying that without the pier, he won't be able to meet the delivery quota. At this, the man threatens him and warns that if the situation continues, it will be difficult to do business with him. Desperate, Choi begs for a little more time and promises he will meet the target no matter what. On the other end of the line, a white-haired guy complains that his shouting is hurting his ears. The gang boss continues to sweat bullets, pleading for just a little more time. Then the mysterious man agrees while holding a strange object that looks like a stone egg. He says he'll wait a bit longer, but the final deadline is before sunrise today. He then tells Choi to get control of the pier while sitting in front of a bizarre place. And finally, he warns that if the boss is late, he'll simply switch suppliers. The call then ends, and Choi curses him, calling him a monster while looking at his phone angrily. In a panic, he asks his driver what time the sun rises, and the guy says maybe around 6. He lights a cigarette and orders the driver to find out the exact time of sunrise. The Hosen boss says they need to crush the rival faction now, because if they don't, they'll all be goners. The hero then returns to his building, arriving home. So, our hero gets home and calls out for his girlfriend Joa, letting her know he's back. But he finds the silence and darkness of the place strange, realizing something is wrong. His face turns serious, and he starts to suspect that something bad happened in there. Just then, the hero looks at the floor and sees footprints that shouldn't be there. His eyes widen with rage, and he realizes there's an intruder inside his home. Suddenly, a man emerges from the darkness and attacks him with a knife, trying to catch him by surprise. Our hero lands an elbow to the goon's face. The hero follows up with a kick that sends the intruder flying backward from the force of the impact. Without wasting a moment, the protagonist charges forward with a devastating punch at the enemy. He lands the blow square on the goon's face. The hero grabs him forcefully and threatens the intruder, telling him to talk if he doesn't want to go blind. With a cold gaze, he then asks where the woman who was supposed to be in the apartment is. Just then, another man appears in the room and starts to clap slowly and mockingly. He says the intruder knew how to use a knife, but the hero took him down instantly, just like the rumors say. The man then introduces himself as Jil-tae-seik, the action leader of the rival Ho-Hyang faction. He ironically apologizes for taking the protagonist's girlfriend hostage like a bunch of thugs. The villain justifies himself by saying he received orders from above, while the young woman looks desperate. Seeing his beloved in danger, the protagonist becomes furious and swears he'll finish all of them. But Tae-sik tells him not to waste his emotions and says he knows exactly what the situation is. The hero clenches his fists in anger and, with no choice, asks what the heck they want from him. The protagonist offers up his Achilles tendons for them to leave. The Ho-Hyang leader replies that normally that would be enough, but today is a different story. He then pulls out a knife and warns that his boss has already decided what to do now. As he was explaining the plan, one of the henchmen attacks the hero with a knife. The blade doesn't pierce his stomach because the hero catches the blade, seeming to understand. But the protagonist asks him to promise that he'll spare the life of the woman who is there. The enemy leader then promises the hero that he definitely won't lay a finger on her. The hero's girlfriend cries desperately, gagged and unable to do anything. He apologizes to his beloved in his thoughts, because it wasn't enough to worry her every day. The protagonist feels terrible that she has to witness something as horrible as this. The girl continues to cry desperately as she watches what's happening to the hero. He thinks he was going to live a normal life, but it seems like it's all over. The protagonist consoles himself by thinking that at least it's him suffering and not her, and he lets go of the blade, allowing himself to be stabbed. He remembers that this time is different from his nightmare, because he is sacrificing himself. He feels relieved as more henchmen take advantage and start stabbing the hero. With the final blow, our hero finally falls to his knees on the ground, completely defeated. The rival gang members just watch him, fallen on the floor with no chance of fighting back. The leader says to go to the boss and that they need to finish everything before dawn. One of the henchmen asks what to do with the girl, and the boss replies, "Do you even have to ask?" He orders them to take the girl because they can't leave any witnesses behind. Meanwhile, our protagonist is left behind, collapsed on his knees. The villainous leader says that as a professional, the hero understands, and the promise was just not to end her life. He explains that the promise was only to spare her life, not to let her leave. Meanwhile, one of the henchmen holds the girl and tells her to stop struggling with a smile. The thug tells her to think positive because she's going to get some special attention from them now. But suddenly, the henchman turns around, startled by something he felt on his leg. It was our hero who, even on the ground, managed to stab the man in the leg. Despite being almost out of it, the protagonist doesn't let go of the thug at all. The henchman screams in pain and surprise, not understanding how he can still move. The goon gets angry and tries to pull out the blade stuck in his leg while cursing the hero. The leader yells at him not to remove the blade, but it's already too late. With that, the goon suddenly collapses to the floor. The leader admits that hitting the artery like that makes him worthy of being called a demon. With that, they both lie on the floor in a pool of blood, side by side. Then the leader approaches with a knife to the hero's neck, ready to deliver the final blow. He tells the hero to rest in heck and strikes the protagonist's neck. The villain orders his men to get a move on because they've wasted time, and one of them asks about the injured guy. The leader says that with a severed femoral artery, the henchman will be gone in 2 minutes. He then tells the cleaners to take care of the body and leaves our hero behind in the apartment. With that, the protagonist is left alone in a pool of blood on the floor of his own home. But suddenly, a mysterious voice praises him, saying his actions were very commendable. The goon with the severed artery starts to cry. He's confused and doesn't understand what in the world is happening. The entity within the hero then says that the time has finally come to offer it a sacrifice. At that, a bizarre hole appears in the ceiling and moves towards the fallen henchman. Meanwhile, the rival gang is already outside, getting into the van to leave the scene. The leader reports on his phone that the job is done, and they're on their way to the boss. Suddenly, he hears a strange noise from outside and becomes alert. The boss asks what that noise was, and someone says something fell on top of their car. He then tells the driver to turn on the lights so they can see what's happening out there. With the lights on, they see our hero standing in front of the car, holding a knife. The leader is shocked and wonders what that is, and if it's really the same guy from before. The leader wonders if he's a demon as the hero stares him down in the darkness, holding the knife. Just then, a mysterious voice says that since he offered a sacrifice according to the contract, the entity will finally grant him its power, and the hero's eye glows an intense blue. We see a completely different place, a mysterious tarot bar called HEX. Inside, a man is talking to a woman at the counter, and she asks if he'll have the usual. The customer then remarks that the place is always empty and thinks it's a miracle the bar hasn't gone bankrupt yet. With a smile, the woman replies that it's all thanks to people like him who believe in tarot cards. The young man jokes that she's calling him a superstitious old man as she serves him a drink. He then comments that he started coming here for fun, but her readings have never been wrong. The woman says it's just a case of good luck finding a very capable man like him. But the customer tells her to just say it was thanks to the cards, and that's why she has no customers. The fortune teller then places a deck on the table and says that readings only have meaning if they're for fun. With that, she spreads the cards on the counter and invites the man to draw a hand just for kicks. The man accepts the proposal and then carefully chooses 3 cards from the pile on the table. Seeing the chosen cards, the woman's expression becomes somewhat serious and thoughtful. The customer quickly notices the change in her face and asks why she's looking at him like that. She turns over the first card and says it represents the past and that it signifies victory for him. Next, the woman reveals the second card, which is the present and represents a state of fulfillment. Finally, she reveals the last card, which represents the future and signifies a great change. The fortune teller interprets that because of past victories, the boss will experience a huge change. With that, the man is relieved and says he thought something terrible was going to happen to him. But the woman explains that the tower card has 2 possible interpretations, change or. With a serious look, she completes the sentence, saying that the other interpretation of the card is ruin. She tries to soften the blow, saying it's just for fun, but a man suddenly appears in the bar. The newcomer shouts the name of the gang boss, Tae-sung, getting his attention immediately. With that, the leader turns around with a serious expression. It was the rival gang's boss, who mocks him for just drinking peacefully there. He threatens him, saying the guy doesn't even realize that today is the day he's going to meet his end. With a smile, the boss scoffs, saying they're quite hardworking for still being on the clock. The rival gets irritated by Tae-sung's calmness and calls him an arrogant jerk. At that, the villain orders his men to finish off the Taeseong leader once and for all. But before they could attack, the boss throws his drink in one of the henchmen's faces. Tae-sung grabs the blade with his left hand and lands an elbow with the other on the enemy's face. He seizes the chance and pulls the blade from the henchman's hand. He dodges an attack from another henchman. He runs into the bar's bathroom to try and escape the enemies surrounding him. At this, the rival leader becomes furious and yells that they need to finish everything before sunrise. With that said, the entire enemy gang runs after him down the hallway with knives in hand. Tae-sung runs to the end of the hallway, hiding behind the wall. One of the henchmen enters the hallway and calls him a rat for running away like a coward. But it was a trap, and the leader surprises him by striking him with a knife. The goon tries to retaliate, but his right hand holding the blade hits the wall. The henchman is completely shocked, not even understanding what just happened. As his blade falls from hitting the wall, Tae-sung strikes the henchman's neck. Seeing the scene, one of the thugs yells for the boss as the other henchman falls defeated. Without wasting a moment, the leader uses the enemy's body to shield himself from the next attack. With a smile, he turns to his rival and asks if he knows what his formation means. Boss Choi is speechless as Tae-sung stares him down, holding the bloody hostage. The rival leader is furious and understands that the enemy purposefully took the right-hand corner. Sung explains that this is the worst situation for a knife fighter, a narrow right-hand corner. In this position, the attacker's right hand is blocked by the wall, while the defender can attack freely. But the boss says there is a solution. Send in a lefty who is stronger than the opponent. He then remembers that by chance Boss Choi is left-handed and stares at him with a challenging gaze. Sung provokes him, telling him to stop sending his men to their doom and come fight himself. We return to the hero, who remains standing in front of his enemy's car. Inside the vehicle, the henchmen are shocked by what they're seeing outside. It was our hero with one eye glowing blue, and the villain wonders if he's a demon. Terrified, the leader Sek yells for the driver to step on it and get out of there as fast as possible. He repeats the order with more force while the driver is still confused about the situation. With that, the car's tires screech on the asphalt, and the van accelerates at high speed. They hit the hero with the vehicle. Even after being hit by the vehicle, the hero doesn't give up and smashes the vehicle's window with the hilt of his blade. On impact, the windshield shatters. The driver is in a total panic seeing the glass break right in front of him. Without hesitation, the hero smashes the driver's face with the hilt of the blade. He then forces his way into the vehicle with bloodlust. Before one of them could say anything, the protagonist strikes the driver's neck with the blade. He simply can't believe the superhuman strength the protagonist was showing. With the henchman on the ground, the hero finishes him off with a merciless, well-aimed knife strike. After taking down the first enemy, he prepares for the next target inside the van. With a demonic look, the hero turns to the other henchman. Completely terrified, the villain tells the protagonist to stay away and not get any closer. But the hero doesn't even care and just grips his bloody knife more firmly. He then attacks the next henchman with a fatal blow to the face, giving him no chance to defend. The villainous leader is paralyzed with fear, seeing his other man defeated so easily. He then realizes that the hero is only using a small sashimi knife to fight. Shocked, Tae-sek calls him a monster for finishing off his henchman with that blade. At that moment, the sun begins to rise, and the hero faces his last target with a cold gaze. The leader cowers in fear, trying to protect himself from our hero's imminent attack. In the confusion, the out-of-control car ends up crashing head-on into theirs. Our hero is thrown far away. He rolls on the ground after the impact. After the crash, both cars are stopped in the middle of the street, with a lot of smoke around them. Even injured, the rival leader gets up and faces the situation with a determined look. On the other side, our hero slowly gets up amidst all the smoke. The villain thinks it would be too weird to perish here after coming so far in life. With that, he pulls out 2 knives and prepares for the final confrontation against our protagonist. The hero stares back at him with focused eyes, ready for the fight to come. He then charges forward with incredible speed towards the rival gang leader. The villain doesn't fall behind and also rushes to attack with his 2 knives in hand. Analyzing the fight, the leader notices that our hero's movements are too wide. He thinks that although the hero is a monster, he's lost his head, and maybe there's a chance. Believing he's found an opening, the villain is hit by a knee from the hero to his face. In the blink of an eye, the hero landed another blow to his face. The rival leader stumbles back from the impact, hitting the car. With that, the villain raises his knife in the air, ready to deliver the finishing blow. He then charges forward with a smile on his face and tries to hit the protagonist's side. The leader believes this is his only chance to win the fight against that monster. At that moment, the blade gets dangerously close to the hero's neck, but the protagonist dodges and strikes the goon's hand with his blade. The hero's strike starts at the hand and goes up to the goon's chest, tearing wherever the blade passed. The blade moves up, approaching his face, while his arm is already all torn up. The goon uses his blade to stop the protagonists from reaching his head. Suddenly, the leader realizes that the hero's knife has always been in his right hand. He understands that the protagonist had the blade in that hand from the beginning of the fight. The villain realizes it was all a trap to lure him into that attack. Then the hero asks what the heck he did with Joa, his girlfriend who was kidnapped. With a bloody smile, the rival leader asks if he's talking about that girl. He reveals with a malicious grin that he offered the girl as a sacrifice to someone. The protagonist is confused and asks what on earth the rival is talking about. The villain tells him not to play dumb since he survived a slit throat. And he continues, saying that he's just like that monster who told them to offer sacrifices. We return to the Hex Bar. 2 henchmen from the rival gang guard the entrance, and one of them thinks it's taking too long. But the other tells him to relax, as they just need to follow orders and watch the door. Suddenly, footsteps are heard, and a mysterious man in sandals approaches them. It was a white-haired guy walking calmly towards them. At this, one of the guards stops him and says the bar is closed and tells him to go somewhere else. But the mysterious man insists, saying he needs to get in because he has an appointment. The henchman gets annoyed, and the other tells him to just get rid of the guy to avoid trouble. Suddenly, the guard who stopped him starts screaming in pain, leaving his partner confused. His neck becomes covered in bulging veins, and he won't stop screaming while the other asks what's wrong. Then something bizarre begins to grow, looking like a dry tree branch. With that, the branch grows and pierces through the man's throat, who screams in total agony. Suddenly, an entire tree sprouts from the guard's body, pinning him to the ground with roots. The other henchman is completely terrified by the scene and asks what in the world that is. Then the white-haired man, object in hand, says he told them he had an appointment. With a sinister smile, he reveals his face and says they promised to meet at sunrise. He enters the hex bar, and the establishment's hallway was already filled with enemies who had been defeated by Taesung. With that, one of the rival's henchmen walks slowly. The henchman was trembling all over as he walked, but Taesung was waiting for him behind the door with his weapon ready for combat. The henchman, even with the knife switched to his other hand, attacks Taesung, screaming. However, out of fear, he attacked without thinking. Looking down, there's Taesung, who just says the enemy's situation is pathetic. With that, he finishes off the opponent, throwing him against the wall. He then faces the enemy leader and taunts him, asking why he sends his men to fight. The young man cleans the knife on his clothes and warns the boss that this fight won't end so easily. He then calls him a coward and challenges him to fight once and for all. At that moment, one of his men appears behind him and says he brought what the boss asked for. The villain orders him to do the job, and his man pours gasoline to burn everything. The strong smell reaches the Taesung leader, who immediately realizes what they're planning. With a malicious smile, the rival leader tells him to stay hidden like a rat in there. Meanwhile, his men finish pouring gasoline, and he says he's going to burn him alive. The villain then takes out a lighter and starts humming a song about the sun rising. But suddenly, the white-haired man we saw before appears, walking calmly. He is also humming a nursery rhyme and approaches the enemies without making a sound. Startled, Boss Choi asks how the so-called Mr. Kwai managed to get in without being seen. With a bouquet of flowers in hand, the man reminds him that they had made a promise. He then reveals that they had arranged to meet as soon as the sun rose that day. Nervously, the gang leader tries to light the lighter and stammers that he's almost done. Mr. Kui offers the flowers, and the villain is confused by this unexpected gesture. With a sinister smile, the white-haired man thanks Choi for his hard work. He says the gang leader can now retire as the bouquet of flowers sprouts from his body. Back to the other fight, our hero holds the villain, who wonders if he's a yokai. Annoyed, the protagonist glares at him and asks if he's messing with him. Spitting blood, the enemy asks if the hero really doesn't know what he truly is. The villain explains that the hero is a being that eats souls and is the natural enemy of humans. With that, he stares at him and states with certainty that the protagonist is actually a yokai. The goon starts to feel a very strong pain all over his body. The pain seems unbearable. Our hero just watches. The hero had the blade stuck in him while the goon kept screaming. At that, tree branches begin to sprout from the goon's torn chest. The branches grow quickly and pierce through the rival leader's body. Even injured, the villain remembers that years ago, that monster offered him a deal. The proposal was that if he handed over humans to the so-called monster, his life would be spared. And like a fool, the gang leader ended up accepting the deal to survive. The enemy continues, saying that the monster made him give a seed to his companions, and his boss accepted everything like an idiot as the branches begin to sprout buds. The villain says it was obvious this was going to happen, and the tree's flowers bloom. With his last words, he warns that if the hero wants to find Gyu Tae-sung, he will also offer him a deal, just as he did with him in the past. The white-haired man tells the enemy not to feel bad about what happened. He explains that the goon lived for 5 more years only because of his help. With that, the being turns and walks into the bar, passing by the men. The monster smiles and says that now that the old partner is gone, it's time to negotiate. He then faces Tae-sung at the door and asks if he will be his new partner. Completely confused, the gang boss asks what on earth that creature is. The man explains that in each country, he's called by a different name, like demon. But he reveals that in this country, people know him by the name yokai. The yokai tells him to relax and says he only came there to offer him a deal. With a bright and frightening gaze, the white-haired man confirms his proposal. The offer is to introduce him to partners in China and North Korea for smuggling. The leader is surprised and says he expected to have to sell his soul or something like that. The yokai explains that he needs partners because he can't just go around eating humans. He then offers all the profits from the business to boss Tae-sung's gang. In return, the leader just needs to choose 10 healthy humans and send them over every week. The gang leader asks if he'll end up like Choi if he refuses the offer. The yokai says yes, but he's sure the young man would live much longer than his former partner. The creature praises him, stating that he is much smarter and more capable after all. But with a smile on his face, Tae-sung apologizes and prepares to refuse the proposal. He then reveals that there are 3 things he would never sell his gangster life. With a swift movement, Tae-sung cuts off the yokai's fingers. Behind the yokai, he delivered another blow to the yokai's face. After his strikes, he stands with a confident smile. He takes the opportunity and cuts the monster's Achilles tendons. As the yokai stumbles from the cut tendon, Tae-sung states his second thing. He would never sell drugs as he lands several blows on the yokai's back. Tae-sung then raises the knife for the final attack while revealing the third thing. Suddenly, a green monster arm grabs his wrist, stopping his attack. The yokai then says he takes back what he said about the young man being smart because of his attitude. But with a smile, he says that's why he likes him, because he felt no fear at all. With that, the creature grabs him by the neck with force, leaving the young man breathless. At this, the being reveals its monstrous form and says it will give him a special chance. He then shows a bizarre seed with a skull and tells the young man to swallow it. The creature promises that if he does, it will forgive his earlier attitude. And on top of that, the monster promises to restore his severed right arm. But even while being choked, the gang boss starts to chuckle. At this, the creature gets confused and asks why he's laughing like that. The young man says it's funny how Mr. Choi ended up being useful in the end. At that moment, he uses the lighter and throws it into the gasoline. And when the lighter hits the ground, the flames spread. With the fire around him, he reveals that the third thing is himself, and he would never live like a coward. Tae-sung affirms that he will never accept the creature's deal, even if he perishes. With a defiant smile, he repeats that he will not live like a coward, no way. The yokai starts to laugh sinisterly, amused by the young man's attitude. The creature finds the whole situation hilarious and laughs nonstop at its opponent's courage. He then calls him an idiot and explains that a little flame like this won't take him out that easily. The monster scoffs at what the young man said about not wanting to live like a coward. With a terrifying smile, he says that hearing that only made him want to see him suffer more. The creature then pulls him closer and says it wants to see Tae-sung's pathetic expression. He then whispers in his ear that people don't pass from the fire, but from the smoke. The monster reveals one of its bizarre mouths and explains that as long as he can breathe, he will continue to suffer for a very long time before finally passing on. The being continues, saying that the pain will come in waves, and the young man will feel his body cooking. The creature says it can't wait to see the gang boss's pathetic face begging. But suddenly, the yokai is surprised by something and its eyes widen in confusion. Before he could burn, a fire extinguisher held by someone appears. The one holding the extinguisher is the protagonist, who asks if that thing is really a monster. Without a second thought, he sprays the extinguisher in the creature's face, covering everything in smoke. With all his strength, he keeps pressing the lever to give his enemy no chance. Taking advantage of the smoke, he runs and uses the metal cylinder as a weapon, hitting the yokai head on. The blow is so strong that the opponent is thrown backward, unable to react to the surprise attack. With that, the blow hits the monster with full force, showing the power of the object's impact. The protagonist then approaches and asks where the woman who was used as a sacrifice is. At that moment, the being reveals its grotesque tails and surrounds the young man, who doesn't seem intimidated. The creature asks with a smile why he wants to know, since he's going to meet his end anyway. But the hero is unfazed and charges forward once again towards his opponent without any fear. And with one of his eyes glowing blue, he bites down hard on the bizarre creature's shoulder. The monster is completely stunned and wonders what in the world is happening. Looking at the blue glow in the young man's eye, the yokai wonders if he was a friend all along. He then says the protagonist doesn't look like one of his kind and accuses him of stealing his sacrifice. But he soon realizes that today's monsters are useless for not knowing if the opponent is stronger. One of its tails approaches, and he tells the young man to stop living in shame and just perish. Suddenly, a blue light appears in the monster's pocket, and it gets confused. At that, the yokai pulls out a small blue stone that was glowing intensely in its hands. The mysterious object continues to resonate, and it wonders what's causing that. Then it realizes that this means there's a connection to the underworld right nearby. With a smile, it finds it fascinating, as this hasn't happened in over 300 years. But without warning, the creature attacks the hero with a powerful blow, knocking him to the ground. The protagonist passes out, and the being says it will let him live for today because he has good backup. It then wonders why the folks from the underworld would make a deal with someone so weak. Grabbing a strange fruit, the monster says it has always wanted to meet someone from the underworld. It boasts, stating that it would honestly do a much better job than the protagonist. Then it whispers to the mask, saying that if they're watching, they just have to call. We see a vehicle at high speed. Two men arrive in a truck at a location, and one of them asks if this is the meeting point. They then stop in front of a huge warehouse, and one of them finds it strange to have a hideout there. He says that if they were selling people as slaves, they'd do it near the coast, not in such a large place. His partner then questions him about why he cares what they do with the people. He adds that they just do what they're told and opens the truck door. Upon opening the truck door, there are some people tied up, and he tells them all to get out. A henchman yells for them to hurry up and threatens to drag them out by force if they don't obey. Among the hostages, we see a girl huddled in the corner, looking completely desolate. One of the henchmen then gets annoyed with the girl and pulls her roughly by the hair. He yells, asking if the girl is deaf, and tells her to get out of there at once. But looking at her up close, he realizes the girl has a completely empty gaze. The guy notices that she's totally out of it, as if she's not really there anymore. With a drop of sweat running down his face, he wonders what on earth they did to that girl. At that moment, a flashback reveals that the young man is actually an undercover cop in the gang. His boss says that being second best in the class is good because the top one draws too much attention. So, for the good of the country, Chief Jang Sung Chul asks if he would like to be a hero. The young officer is surprised by the term enro. The chief explains that missing persons cases are piling up and the gang has international connections. Therefore, the young officer's mission is to investigate the group by infiltrating it as one of its members. A year later, a gang war opened up a delivery position for the undercover cop, and with this chance, he finally witnessed the human trafficking operation with his own eyes. This led him to the headquarters of the gang's partners as he dragged the kidnapped girl. He had already reported to his chief and thought backup would arrive at any moment to shut it all down. But something unexpected happens, and the cop is shocked, not understanding the current situation at all. Suddenly, his delivery partner pulls out a dagger and a tense atmosphere sets in. The guy yells, asking what's happening, because they did everything as planned before. A man with a bizarre scar says those are the boss's orders, and the deal with the gang is over. He then reveals that they are no longer partners but a product to be sold as well. The cop's partner is furious and shouts the word product, not believing what he just heard. But the man with the scar calmly says that fighting is useless and that he should accept his fate. Ignoring the warning, the young man tightens his grip on the dagger's hilt, and with a cry of rage, he charges towards the enemy to fight for his freedom. Effortlessly, the man with the scar dodges the blade. Then, with incredible speed, he delivers a powerful punch towards the attacker. The blow lands squarely, and the cop's partner is thrown far away, already knocked out. The boss says he's worthless now and orders them to throw him out or give him away for free to a client. He then turns to the undercover cop and the girl, who are standing still. The man then gives the order to turn all the remaining people into products for sale. With that, the hero's girlfriend is tied up, and he announces that the shipment will be made today. Soon after, the prisoners are forced to drink something to induce vomiting and clear their stomachs. The scene is disgusting, showing all of them getting sick into blue buckets, unable to resist. To make matters worse, one of the henchmen grabs a high-pressure hose to wash them. Lying on the floor, the captives are brutally washed with jets of water to get them clean. A hooded man asks how many products are for the partner, and he replies that there are 2 premium pieces. The boss points and orders 2 to be packaged as premium and the rest as standard. After that, they are all lined up and taken by hooded men to another room. The cop realizes they are being prepared for extraction and calls them lunatics. But he thinks to himself that he just needs to hold on a little longer because backup is on its way. With a determined look, the officer stands firm, waiting for the help that is coming. In front of him, the girlfriend seems to have lost all hope, with a completely empty gaze. The cop then apologizes to her for what happened earlier, trying to get her attention. He then asks the girl to hang in there and not give up because help was on the way. At that moment, he realizes that those words of encouragement were also for himself. But suddenly, his eyes widen in pure terror at something shocking. The cop then sees several shelves filled with bodies stacked in a macabre way. To deny the terror he felt, he forced himself to keep walking into the nightmare. We then see a dark building. We see our hero with his eyes closed. Just then, he finally awakens from a sleep or a forced blackout. The hero wakes up in an unfamiliar bed and realizes he's no longer at the site of his last fight. Completely confused, the hero wonders where he is and what happened after the confrontation. Then, a memory of the fight against that yokai comes to his mind very clearly. He seems to be processing the memory of the monster while trying to understand his current situation. Suddenly, a mysterious woman appears at the bedroom door and asks if he slept well. The hero is surprised and completely baffled, asks the woman who she really is. She then begins to introduce herself and reveals that she was the owner of the tarot bar that caught fire. The woman also claims that she was the one who saved the protagonist's life from those deadly flames. And finally, she says she is also the person who exorcises yokai like him, calling herself an exorcist. The young man grinds his teeth in anger and remembers that the jerk who attacked him said the same thing. With that, he gets angry and yells, asking what everyone is talking about and denying he's a yokai. But the woman just tells him to shut up and says she only saved him because he could be useful. The woman then threatens him, saying she can exorcise him anytime she wants. And furthermore, with a dagger in her hand, she glares at him and continues her explanation of his situation. She then looks at the protagonist's body and says that no normal human has a physique like that. At this, the hero looks at his own hands, shocked and confused about what's happening. The exorcist explains that a yokai can regenerate even with a pierced heart or severed limbs. She adds that as long as the head is intact, they regenerate like an insect. The protagonist then interrupts her to ask what the heck a yokai is, anyway. The woman takes a drag from her cigarette. She explains that they are beings that steal human bodies to live hidden among people. In that macabre room, they continue walking. The undercover cop we saw earlier is there and wonders what that is in complete terror. A hooded man approaches him and uses a strange device on his neck without warning. The object delivers a violent shock to the goon in front. With the shock, the young man falls to the ground, powerless, while the others watch. Lying on the ground, the goon writhes in pain, unable to get up after the surprise attack. The undercover cop screams, calling them scumbags for hurting people without a second thought. But the hooded man reveals that the victims aren't actually dead yet. A white-haired man appears and explains that he only damaged their vertebrae to paralyze them. He continues, saying that now they can see, hear, and feel fear, but they can't move. The villain smiles and calls it the house specialty, a product for lazy customers. The officer is furious and yells that the police will arrive any moment to arrest them. He then continues his threat, saying that everyone there will spend the rest of their lives in prison. But suddenly, his chief appears, saying the smell is already delicious, leaving him shocked. The young cop can't believe his eyes and stammers his superior's name, completely confused. The chief smiles and congratulates the young man on his hard work spying on the gang for him. The albino then asks if the officer is one of the special dishes, and the chief confirms the suspicion. With a bizarre smile, the superior says there's no need to package him, because he'll eat him right there. He then begins to loosen his clothes, completely undressing. He then approaches and says he's very hungry, sending the cop into a total panic. In complete terror, the young man asks his chief what on earth he is doing now. The superior says he has a meeting in 2 hours and therefore has no time to change. The cop panics and his chief tells him to just stay quiet and not move. Then suddenly, his superior's face begins to open in a bizarre way. The cop is completely terrified by the grotesque transformation of his former chief. The creature then says that the smell of the cop's fear is sweet. Returning to the conversation, the hero asks if they mix with humans and eat people. The exorcist confirms this and says that many crimes in the world are actually the work of these spirits. She adds that they are just trying to hunt and feed on humans. She then grabs the curtain and pulls it aside. She then reveals that she actually didn't think it was him, but his boss, Gu Taesung. But she says something happened and pulls back a curtain, revealing what's on the other side. Behind the curtain we see his boss all bandaged up, and she says he was just a common villain. With a look of contempt, she calls him simple and despicable human trash. Our hero is shocked to see the pitiful state of his former gang boss. The man appears to be unconscious and completely defeated in the hospital bed. We have a flashback of the hero and his friend in a suit walking down a dark street at night. One of them asks the protagonist how long he plans to keep doing this. The hero questions the reason for the question and reminds him of the promise they made to go all the way together. Taesung says he has a good memory and comments that it's been 5 years since that promise. But he states that the hero doesn't need to go all the way with him this time and releases him from the oath. Surprised by the sudden change, the protagonist asks the reason for this strange attitude. Suddenly, a woman appears in front of them, and his partner asks what he meant by that. We see a young woman approaching the two men with a serene look on her face. The partner then greets her and apologizes for keeping the protagonist out so late. He then tells the hero that it's not with him that the hero should go all the way on this journey. And with that, he explains that his friend has a chance to live a normal life and not like a demon. Back in the present, the protagonist asks the exorcist how he can find that spirit. The woman then looks at him and asks what he will do when he finally finds his target. He says that monster took the most precious person in the world from him, and that he will end it all. The woman says he could be useful, but warns him that he doesn't stand a chance of defeating the creature. The hero then reveals that in his dream the flame spoke to him, leaving the exorcist confused. He explains that the flame said that anything with a soul, no matter what it is. With a horrifying expression, he finishes by saying it would give him power. The scene then cuts to a protest where someone is complaining about the sentence of a terrible criminal. We see several protesters with signs demanding the man be sent back to prison immediately. Police officers watch the crowd as it's revealed that the culprit was released a week ago. A reporter explains that in addition to the protesters, there are streamers creating a chaotic scene on site. One of the streamers yells for the criminal to come out and fight like a real man without hiding. A tattooed man promises his viewers that he will break into the house as soon as he hits 1,000 views. Another streamer says he will eat 20 cups of ramen to pray for the criminal's demise. The crowd continues to shout and push each other, creating a huge commotion in the street. Inside the house, the criminal complains about the noise and wonders what everyone is talking about outside. He then shows his electronic ankle monitor and says he has already served his time in prison. With an insane look, he thinks that maybe he shouldn't put up with this and should just finish them all. His gaze reveals all his madness and dark intentions against the noisy crowd. Suddenly, our hero appears in front of the criminal with a hammer and a very serious look. The criminal then asks who he is and how on earth he managed to get into his house. Without answering, the protagonist just stares at the criminal with a cold and determined gaze. The scene returns to the conversation, and the woman asks if the creature offered him power in exchange for a sacrifice. The protagonist then confirms the woman's suspicion with a simple and very direct answer. The woman then takes another drag from her cigarette while thinking. With a determined look, she turns to him and proposes that they make a deal. The hero is surprised by the proposal and repeats the word deal, not quite understanding. She explains that she will give him a list of villains suspected of being yokai for him to go and finish them all. She says that if they are yokai, it's good for her because she can exorcise them, and for him because he can gain power. Without hesitation, the protagonist accepts the deal but says he has one small condition. He then asks how many suspects there are, and if they are enough for him to defeat the so-called Kui. With a confident smile, the woman tells him not to worry about it at all. She guarantees that when it comes to villains, there are more than enough to go around. Back at the previous criminal's apartment, the hero questions what on earth he really is. Completely confused, the criminal can only repeat the question, not understanding anything. Without wasting time, the hero grabs the target's hair and questions whether he is human. With the hammer raised, he asks if he is actually yokai. We return to the place where the protagonist's girlfriend is. The creature comments on feeling the cop's fear. With that, the former chief transforms into a bizarre flower and grabs the cop. Completely paralyzed with fear, Officer Jaeong Min stares at the creature without reacting. At that, the monster begins to devour the young man, who can only call out for his superior. He then lets out an agonizing scream of pain as he is consumed by the yokai. The albino just looks at his henchman behind him and asks if he is very hungry. He then points to the girlfriend, saying she is the other dish. We see the hero's girlfriend watching the creature devour the cop. The yokai that was attacking the cop then grabs the hero's girlfriend. But surprisingly, the woman shows no fear at all and faces the creature. The monster wonders if she has gone mad and laments not being able to feed on her soul. However, it says her flesh seems to be of high quality and prepares for the attack. The creature then opens its grotesque mouth, preparing to attack the woman without mercy. The woman, however, gives a slight smile and thinks that it finally didn't take too long. With a serene look, she says she can now go to a man named Do-jin. Suddenly, the albino grabs the other monster's arm, stopping it from attacking the woman. The white-haired one apologizes and says he will prepare another special dish for him, and with a serious look, he states that this human is not a product to be consumed. The other monster becomes furious and asks why he is interrupting its meal. The creature then yells that it liked that human and is going to devour her right now. The albino asks him to be patient and promises another special dish for the next day. But the monster screams that it's hungry now. The yokai then continues its tantrum and tells the white-haired one not to interfere. The albino then calls him a scarecrow who can't even feed on souls. With a firm grip, he tells the creature to calm down and glares at it with a cold look. The monster gets scared and apologizes, saying it got carried away in the moment. The white-haired one then turns to his henchman and tells him to prepare another dish for the chief. The man with the scar on his face agrees and says he understood the order perfectly. With everything settled, the albino turns back to the hero's girlfriend. He then faces her and says he will remove her from the list of products for sale and consumption. The white-haired man, smiling, says that maybe she's talking about a friend. At this, we return to the conversation where the hero remembers how his body regenerates in a bizarre way. The strange things on his body then retract and return to a more normal appearance. The young man looks at his own hand and comments that this body is quite convenient for hunting. The woman praises him, saying he learns fast, and reminds him that regeneration works as long as the head is intact. But the exorcist warns that there is one more important thing he needs to know about yokai. She explains that there are two ways a monster can feed, the first being to devour human flesh, and the second is to suck the person's soul using the fear they feel, so he asks about fear. The woman confirms the information and says that a yokai can absorb the soul of a human who fears it. She reveals that he still has a human soul, and therefore, the hero must never feel fear of them. The scene returns to the confrontation, and the protagonist holds the target's hair, questioning his identity. With the hammer raised, he repeats the question, wanting to know if the man is a human or a monster. The criminal panics completely and screams, asking why the hero is doing this. Without any mercy, our hero then smashes the goon's head with the hammer. The man falls to the ground, and the protagonist stands over him, watching with a cold and emotionless gaze. With his face splattered with blood, the hero remains silent for a moment, processing. The criminal's body lies motionless on the floor after the brutal attack from the hero. He then takes out his cell phone and calls the exorcist to report what happened at the house. He then informs her that he got the target and reveals that he was just a regular human, not a yokai. The woman asks if he checked if the man was really gone for good, and the young man confirms it. But she questions how he can be so sure of that without concrete proof of the situation. Then she asks if he's sure that was the real head, and suddenly, the hero is attacked. A powerful kick hits him squarely and sends him flying with force against the living room wall. The criminal who was supposed to be down for the count gets up and suddenly shows superhuman agility. With a leap, he positions himself to attack again, leaving the protagonist completely shocked. The man's body then begins to contort, but he ends up on top of the protagonist. The hero manages to find an opening to attack the creature, but with great strength, the yokai pins the hero's arms to the floor. The criminal glares at him and says he doesn't look human. And with a furious look, the monster finally asks if our protagonist is an exorcist. Suddenly, the yokai's foot transforms grotesquely, and he uses it to immobilize the hero's arm. With a deformed face, the creature complains that things always end up this way. As he speaks, a bizarre eye opens on his stomach, and he complains about his luck. But the monster then reveals its true head and asks if he thinks it's going to lose. Our hero is shocked, and the monster calls him a rookie for not finding its real head. He then reveals his spider form and asks if the hero is paralyzed with fear at the sight. The creature then approaches and says it was tired of holding back all the time. But before the monster can finish, the hero hits something in the creature's eye. With the blow, the creature screams in pain and is thrown backward by the force of the impact. Our hero says the monster talks too much and, with the hammer in hand, confirms that this is the head. Without wasting time, the hero then lands a violent blow on the enemy's true head. With its head crushed, the monster writhes in agony and wonders how a mere human could attack it. In a final act of desperation, the creature tries to attack the protagonist one more time. But our hero calmly says he can tell everything just by its movements. He then says the monster looks strong, but its movements indicate it has never fought seriously. With that, the creature tries to apply an arm lock on the hero. The monster's attack seems to hit the protagonist. The monster manages to grab the hero with its arms. The creature then taunts him and asks what he will do without his hammer and threatens to break his back. The hero lifts his head forcefully, preparing a headbutt. Our hero hits him with a violent headbutt. With the hammer in hand, he says he was curious to know what kind of incredible beings yokai were, but he concludes that the monster is nothing more than a neighborhood thug who only knows how to scare others. Fallen on the ground, the creature is in despair, unable to believe it. The monster then asks what he is, and the hero just stares at him with a terrifying look. The scene returns to the conversation where the woman warns him to never fear yokai, lest he be devoured. Hearing this, the young man just gives a small smile, as if he finds her recommendation funny. The exorcist then gets confused and asks him what's so funny. He looks at his own hand and asks if she really thinks he still has fear inside him. And with a look full of hatred, he says he does not fear those who took everything he loved. He then says that from now on, the one who should be afraid is no longer him, but the yokai. And with his eyes glowing, he delivers the final blow to that creature. After a while, there are some knocks on the door of the now dead yokai's apartment. Outside, they announce that his electronic device has been damaged and threaten to break down the door. One of the officers then yells furiously, asking if the man thought he could cut the ankle monitor and escape. But as soon as they enter the place, the officer is completely shocked. He and his partner are paralyzed in horror, and the other officer even covers his mouth to keep from vomiting. One of them then yells that it's a crime scene as the target's body is on the floor, all mangled. We then see a very large hospital. Next, a news report informs that the criminal was found deceased at home a week after being released. The news also says he had a cardiac arrest, and that his head and other parts were damaged. The police are now investigating the case as a revenge homicide due to the state of the body. Sitting in a hospital room, the exorcist's partner asks why a monster would go to prison. The woman replies that not even yokai can reveal themselves, because a stronger monster would take them out. The hero then gets confused and asks the woman to explain what she meant by that. She then explains that for monsters, humans are a limited and very important food source. Because of this, high-level yokai monopolize this resource and want humans to remain unaware. She explains, saying that the best way to manage livestock is to not let them know they are livestock. The woman then makes an analogy, saying that they would also eliminate anyone who caused trouble in their territory. The hero's partner then asks if the yokai he defeated was just a nobody, and she confirms it. She reveals that monsters are divided into 7 levels, and that the criminal was from the lowest of all. Our hero then clenches his fist and asks them to find him a real opponent next time. He looks at the girl's bed and says he needs to get stronger and faster to be able to save her soon. The exorcist then says she was about to do just that but warns him that he needs to be prepared for what's coming. With a serious look, she warns him that it's a powerful monster and is beyond human imagination, handing him a photo. The hero takes the picture and asks if the man in the photo is a monster, and if she's sure about it. She replies that it's not certain, but there's a high chance, and asks if he knows him. The hero then stares at the photo and, with a serious look, replies that he knows him very well. He then reveals that this man was the one who brought them into this world of yokai hunters. With the photo in hand, he reveals that this was their former boss, leaving the hero surprised. We have another flashback from years ago of the hero. Right after, in the flashback, we see the hero punching a goon a few times. He was about to be hit by a surprise attack. He ended up being hit in the head with an iron bar. The attacker curses the hero as he stumbles. But suddenly, a sneaker flies in his direction, and the man smiles very sinisterly. Then our hero's friend landed a blow on the goon. Lying on the ground, his friend yells for him to get up, or else he'll end up getting stomped. But Taezong is thrown with force and can't react to the enemy's attacks. With that, the 2 young men end up on the ground, completely defeated by the stronger man. The hero then screams desperately for Taezong as blood runs down his head. Suddenly, a group of thugs appears, and the leader complains about having to deal with brats. He then asks why the 2 got involved in adult matters, and says they should be studying. The hero then yells that they forced the kids from the orphanage to sell illegal things. The gang leader doesn't care and asks what the problem is, since they are just orphans. With a face full of rage, the protagonist curses the thug, unable to hold back. The leader then tells them not to worry and that he'll let them live since they're just kids. But the leader says that even so, they need to be punished for the audacity of challenging him. With a cold look, he then orders his henchmen to mess up the 2 young men's legs. He says he'll do this so they can never challenge an adult again in their lives. Suddenly, a mysterious voice appears and asks if they're not ashamed to use weapons against children. The two young men are surprised and look at the man who suddenly appeared to help them. It was their former boss, who recognizes them as the supposed kings of the alleys in that area. Tae-sung then tells that man to leave before he gets seriously hurt. But the newcomer just laughs and starts walking towards the thugs. Taking off his jacket, he comments that older people like to meddle in other people's business. The thug's boss gets confused and asks what the heck that guy is doing. With a confident smile, the man challenges them and asks if he should start the fight first. Before they could react, the older man pokes one of the goons in the eyes. With a precise attack, he hits the leader's neck, who screams in pain from the strong impact. Without giving the enemy time to react, he continues the attack with a violent kick on the opponent. After taking down the leader, he turns to the young men and says he's going to teach them how to really fight. He continues his lesson and says that you can't look at enemies one by one in a group fight. One of the henchmen then tries to attack him with a bat, screaming in rage. But the man grabs him by the head and explains that you should see the whole group as a single enemy. With that, he lands a punch on the goon and says to attack the weakest point first to win. As the henchman was sent flying, the older man grabs him by the arm. Without wasting time, the man continues his demonstration with another violent and precise blow on the enemy. With two henchmen on the ground, he explains that the important thing is not to take down all opponents. Another henchman then tries to attack him from behind with a knife, but he turns and hits the enemy's neck, saying the goal is to break their will to fight. The blow is precise, and the henchman is hit in a vital spot, falling to the ground instantly. The other thugs are paralyzed with fear, and the leader asks who on earth that guy is. The mysterious man smiles and says that an enemy with no will to fight is no longer a real enemy. With a dirty face, he explains that the defeated become obstacles for the other henchmen. As he was explaining, he dodges a blow from a sneaky henchman. He then grabs another thug without giving him any chance to react to the attack. With a brutal blow, he smashes another henchman's head on the ground with incredible force. The thug's blood then splatters on the wall with the violence of the impact he suffered. Smiling, the man turns to the young men and asks where the next attack from the enemies will come from. One of the heroes then replies that the next blow will come from the left, impressed by the fight. The man then dodges the attack and prepares a violent punch right to the henchman's chin. The blow lands squarely on the henchman's face. Turning to the young men, he begins to review the fight and asks what should be done against a group. The hero then repeats that the goal is to break the enemy's will to continue fighting. The man praises him, saying he learns very quickly. From the ground, he picks up the blade of the fallen henchman. The leader despairs and starts to back away in fear, begging the man to stop. Scared, he swears he will never touch the children again and asks for the fight to end right there. The fighter smiles and says he'll let him live since he promised never to bother them again. But he says the thug still needs to be punished and attacks his shoulder with the knife. As the leader screams in pain, the man smiles and says that now he won't challenge adults anymore. With the knife in hand, he says the fight worked up his appetite as the gang leader screams in pain. With everything settled, he then turns to the two young men and asks if they've eaten anything. And with a friendly smile, the man invites them to eat, saying he'll buy them something tasty. In the present day, they meet again in a restaurant. We then see that the old man is there. The hero formally greets his former boss. The older man laughs and says he's been retired for a long time and is no longer a gang boss. With a serious look, he then comments that he heard the story and that Tae-sung's friend ended up getting hurt. The hero then confirms the information with a desolate expression. The former boss then takes a drink and says that's why he always warned them about the thug life. The hero then remembers that the man said being a thug is accumulating karma for a lifetime, and he completes the thought, saying that one day that karma comes back, and that's why they don't live forever. With that, the hero also takes a drink to calm down and process everything, but he reveals that the problem isn't just his friend, and that his woman was also taken by the enemies. Hearing that, the former boss remains silent for a moment. The hero then puts his hand inside his suit jacket. With that, the hero places a knife on the table and faces his former master with a serious look. The reflection in the blade shows the older man's face as the hero asks if he is human, and with a face full of rage, he finishes the question, wanting to know if his former boss is a human or a monster.